Hi, I'm Anthony Originello, CEO of the Chartered Professionals in Human Resources for BC and Yukon. We represent more than 8,000 members, and as the organization dedicated to advancing the HR profession through education, advocacy, awareness, professional development, as well as our recognized and impactful CPHR designation, we are proud to be a sponsor of this show. We have been the voice of the HR profession since 1942. Learn more about us at cphrbc.ca.
In this edition of Careers That Matter, I'm joined by Mark Jaccard, the Chair and CEO of the BC Utilities Commission. Mark, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
What does your job look like? What do you do?
So, thanks for asking that. And I'll just take a little detour to say that for much of the last 37 years, I've been a professor of sustainable energy at Simon Fraser University, and I still do that. I'm on leave of absence, but I still run a research group.
Okay, we'll get to that in a moment.
So I spend time reading theses and all sorts of stuff. But in my current job, which I accepted almost 2 years ago in 2023, but which I also did from 1992 to 97, I run the BC Utilities Commission, which is located in downtown Vancouver on Howe Street. And what the commission does, it's a staff of about 100 people, some of whom are commissioners, about eight of us. And the other 90 are staff who have expertise in engineering, accounting, economics, law. And what we do is, because society wants its energy utilities to be monopolies, we don't want competition. So we want BC Hydro to be a monopoly. We want Fortis Gas to be a monopoly. And then Fortis Electric in the interior and Pacific Northern Gas. So we have these monopolies, and we have them because the networks are so important, like the gas distribution system, the electricity transmission and distribution, that you don't want multiple sets of these. You just want one set. Just like your sewage, your water supply. So we have these monopolies, and we say, while they're operating, we better have an outside entity look at what they're doing. And that entity should have expertise. It should be able to say, oh, you can't have that rate increase, or you shouldn't make that investment, or okay, yes, you can buy electricity from those people, but not those people. And so it has to have power and expertise to do that. And then the last thing I'll say about us is that we're, one of the jargon terms is that we're quasi-judicial. And it just means that some of our proceedings and our powers are like a lower level court. And so we may have hearings. They can be written hearings, but they can be oral hearings. And if they're oral hearings, they almost look like a court process. So we have a lot of these entities throughout our society. We're one of the bigger ones. The Securities Commission is bigger than us, the BC Securities Commission. But federally, communications regulation, you have a lot of regulatory bodies, and we're the one for energy in British Columbia.
So what does your role specifically look like in that organization? Are you going through all these different reports and whatnot, or are you running the team?
That's a great question. In some jurisdictions, the CEO who runs the organization and all the staff is a separate position from the chair, who is like a judge. So the chair function is you're like the Chief Justice, and I have so a proceeding comes before us. So BC Hydro applies to increase its rates. Then I have to look at what that application was. Staff advise me, our legal counsel advise me, and then I pick 2 or 3 commissioners to be on that panel. If I pick, and one of them chairs it, if I'm on the panel, I tend to chair it. If I'm not on that panel, I never get involved in that case again. It would be like the Chief Justice being involved in some trial, like talking to the judge about the evidence in something where that other Chief Justice, she or he, is not making a decision. So I pick panels for hearings. If I'm on the panel, then I'm just like a judge looking at this. And if I'm not on the panel, I'm not involved at all. As the CEO, I'm running the staff. So it's, are we running our organization well? Are we training people properly? Are they effective they're like the prosecution in a they're neutral, but they're like a neutral prosecution, and so they provide the commissioners in a particular hearing say to them, we want to learn more about this, or we want you to give us some advice, do some calculations for us. What questions do you think we ought to ask to these interveners or this applicant? And so the CEO runs that. Underneath me, there is a COO, a Chief Operating Officer, and thank goodness there is, because because I have this dual function. I'm really grateful that I have a COO as well.
So, do you also have an outward-facing role, other than doing interviews like this, where you're out talking to the community? Do you also have a role interacting with the government? Like, how many different hats as CEO do you wear?
Wow, that's a good question. So, I think that if you went across, so there's an association of utility commissioners from across Canada, and we meet once a year. And it's interesting to see how different provinces act differently. My style 30 years ago was to be really out there in the community, to do interviews, to do community meetings. It's just my style. And I intend to keep doing that now. My predecessor probably had a slightly different style. When it comes to the government, I talk to deputy ministers. We sort of have a check-in, once a month. And in that check-in, you have to be very careful because we cannot discuss anything that's a live issue. And I am not to be lobbying for particular policies and things like that. So, because I'm really interested in sustainable energy, climate policy, I have to sort of zip it sometimes and not talk about certain things. If I talk rarely to the minister, maybe 4 or 5 times a year. If I do, we usually need someone else present, and we make sure not to talk about any issues. For example, let's say BC Hydro has got something before us and I'm on the panel, then the minister and I, that's on our list of things we cannot talk about. Mm-hmm. But we do try to, you and I have done an interview where you've asked about electrification in the province and how pressing it is. You really do want your Utilities Commission, and especially our staff, to be working with government staff. So most of the interactions happen at the staff to staff level, not at my level. I mostly keep a distance from the government.
So let's go back over your career. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Vancouver, and I went initially to Simon Fraser University. Then I did my doctorate in energy economics at the University of Grenoble in France.
So you knew by the time that you were going into your post-secondary educational journey, that you wanted to be in the energy sector in economics.
I think maybe by 3rd or 4th year as an undergrad. I think before that I thought I was going to be a novelist. Maybe everybody thinks that at some point. And then it really happened at the master's level. I had some mentors who really influenced me. When I first graduated with an economics degree, I didn't go back to university for 4 years. I traveled around the world. I was a commercial fisherman. I motorcycled in Australia, and I worked for a consulting company run by Pat Carney called Gemini North. And I became very close to Pat Carney because she just had a big influence on me. She's someone who said, she was very smart and very engaged on being applied, on how can I make society better. So I've had many mentors that are important to me, but when I think about that phase in my life, when I finally decided I'm going on this path, it was really, I was probably 25 or 26 years old. I was already some years out from university, and then I did a master's that was very focused and a PhD that was very focused, and I was lucky, I got job offers, and then I even got an offer back where my parents were still alive and an extended family, and I love Vancouver, and I felt very blessed to come back here.
I've got to ask, why Grenoble?
Yeah, so Grenoble I was lucky. I had a scholarship from the Government of Canada, which in those days were portable. You could take them with you. It's called an SSHRC, Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, and There was like, it was kind of strange if I give you this, it was like MIT, Cambridge, and Grenoble were the top energy modeling, energy economics modeling institutes in the world. And as a Vancouverite who'd always hiked in the mountains here, I got intrigued with, and someone who'd done well in high school French. I mean, my first language
because you
is
must
not,
have been speaking French.
well, yeah. Well, I mean, I got better fast.
Yeah.
And I just thought, what a great challenge. And also, I'm from a Swiss-French, Jaccard is a French, Swiss-French, and I had relatives over there. So this is all the reasons I ended up in Grenoble. It meant I could hike in the mountains, but it was actually a really good institute, and it really made it for me. The people that were there are still, like, they were top people in the world.
So you complete your PhD. Where'd you go to work?
So I thought I had a job offer in Denmark, and then my old institute at Simon Fraser University, called the School of Resource and Environmental Management. It's still called that, and it has some economists, but it has planners, biologists. It's an interdisciplinary school on sustainable management of our environment and resources. And they called me up and said, "We got a job for you if you're interested." And so I came back. Then they created some kind of a competition, and I've been there ever since.
Wow. But you've taken other assignments along the way, which we, of course, have talked about, your role at the BC Utilities Commission. But you're also an author. You indicated that at one point you wanted to be a novelist, so that desire to write never went away.
Yeah.
And how much of your life do you still devote to writing?
In the last 2 years, almost none, because I'm doing 2 jobs. I'm running the Utilities Commission, and I still have 4 PhD students, 5 master's students. I'm not teaching anymore. That's great. But I do want to do another book that is related to the last one and related to the discussion that you and I had, that you've done an interview with me on, which is, again, trying to figure out how to help people who are climate concerned be more effective in our society with all the other people pushing on that. So I love to write. And the reason I wrote as well is because I wrote a lot of op-eds. Op-eds were really what I've done. That's for like 30 years. I wrote a lot for CD Howe. I became a fellow at CD Howe because they're a very applied group. They can really market your work to influence governments and so on. And at various times I've said yes to be an advisor, sometimes even paid or unpaid, from right across the political spectrum in Canada. Rona Ambrose became Stephen Harper's Minister of Environment and hired me as her advisor. Gordon Campbell, hired me. But NDP governments have hired me and Liberal governments have hired me. Yeah.
So if there's a young person looking at this interview right now going, wow, what a career you've had, like, you're an inspiration for me. When you take a look at, like, yourself, your inner self, what do you think were 1 or 2 of the qualities that you now recognize that you possess that helped to ensure that you've had a successful career?
What a great question. And, I'll probably have a different answer tomorrow. I think mentors were a big thing for me. And I gave you the example of Pat Carney. There were many others. And when I say these mentors, it wasn't like the mentors told me what to do. I saw what they were doing. So I had professors that I looked up to. Some of them were not even, that I didn't even know personally. Some of them I did, but some of them I didn't. Like Paul Joskow at MIT. He always took something that society thought it knew, like energy efficiency saves you money. And then he did research on that. Or that wind and solar are cheap. And then he did research on that. And so he was, and so I thought, wow, what luck to be in academia where you have a boss and everything and you have to do the right things, but you also can pick kind of where you go in your research. And so as I've said to my kids, one of whom is now an economics professor at UBC, I've always said to them, society pays me to do my hobby, and I love it. And so it meant that, you never kept track of your hours. Once I did for something, and it was like 70 to 80 hours a week, of course, but it wasn't really work. It was obsession with something. And yeah, so that's sort of where it came.
So if I were to characterize what I think is one of those driving elements about you, is you have a fascination to really understand how things actually work.
I thank you. And I've had media people say that to me. Just one example was when I did do sustainable fossil fuels. Jeffrey Simpson, who is very good columnist, Canada Profile, and wrote some really good things about my book and then interviewed me, and then eventually we wrote a book together called Hot Air, that's an example of someone, and his ability to write so fast, like all journalists, was also me learning. And Pat Carney was the same way. She'd been a journalist as well, and so learning how to be able to get stuff down, and therefore the craft of op-eds became a big thing for me as well. Yeah.
Well, thanks for giving us a little insight into your career and your current job.
Thanks very much. I really appreciated this opportunity. Thanks, Stu.